Our next video series is all about pond management. In part one, I'm talking with Mossy Properties land specialist Sean Maloy about the do's and don'ts of pond management, what to look for and what to avoid if you have a pond on your property.
Mossy Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.
As I mentioned in the intro, this new video series is all about pond management, and I'm here today with Mossy Properties land specialist Sean Maloy, and we're going to treat this first video as if I'm his prospective buyer. I'm looking for a piece of property that has ponds or on it, and he's going to walk me through the do's and don'ts and what to look for, what to avoid maybe if there are ponds on a piece of property that I'm interested in.
Good deal. Well, thanks for coming out to Central North Carolina, Cody, and today we want to talk about one of the most important things that people ask me about when they're looking for a piece of property is water features, and pond being one of those main ones that people desire. And the reason for that is multiple. It's a year-round feature on the property, so it can be used for fishing, swimming, boating, kayaking, canoeing, duck hunting. There's all kinds of things that can be done on a pond throughout the year for the entire family. So it becomes one of the most important assets on a property.
Right.
And ponds are not cheap to build. So if you can find a property that already has a pond on it, the chances are you're going to get more value for your money than if you bought a piece of property that did not have a pond on it and you constructed it.
Right.
So it's almost like buying an existing home. In some cases you can come out a little ahead on that. So today what we're going to do is we're going to contrast a couple different ponds on different properties. And the first one that we're at today is one that I think is a good example of a pond that needs some help.
Okay.
And what has happened with this pond, it's right behind us. It's a beautiful pond and full of wildlife, but over time it was not managed. And if you don't manage a pond, it's just like a field, forest, anything else on a property, Mother Nature's going to manage it for you.
Right.
So Mother Nature has decided to manage this for the landowner, and we're going to point out some of those things that could have been prevented.
Okay.
And we're going to show you what they are and what to look for on your pond if you have one, or if you're looking at buying land. These are some things that you want to look for if you're thinking about purchasing a property with a pond.
Okay.
So with that, let's get started and go for a little walk around. What do you think?
Absolutely, sounds good.
Hey Cody, we're here at the pond. When we get to the pond, the first thing I'm looking at is the ecosystem of a pond, and it's very important for a lot of reasons. It tells me a little bit about the health of the pond by the vegetation that's in and around the pond. It also tells me about the aquatic life that might be in the pond and how it supports the local wildlife. The other thing I'm looking for is sometimes the color of the water is an indicator of how a pond is being fed. It can be spring fed, it can be runoff fed. If it's really cloudy and dirty, that means we might have some erosion concerns to look at and look for. But when I look out at this pond, it's relatively clear. And we've had about 2.5 inches of rain in the last 5 days. And if this was not spring fed, it would be beat up. The mud from the bottom would be stirred up and it would be a cream color, this little pond. But when I'm looking at the vegetation around here, and we have a lot if you look, this tells me that the pond water is safe for vegetation. And vegetation also puts oxygen into the water for the aquatic life. Another thing vegetation can tell you is the water height and how it might vary from season to season, because some of these plants need consistent water height to grow. If they don't keep that consistency, they will die. And what I look at here, it shows me that this water stays consistently the same height all the way around the pond banks. So if I come across a pond that has rings on it on the banks, or we've got vegetation then no vegetation, that's a concern that might lead into, do we have a leak in the pond, maybe in the pond dam? Are we getting poor runoff? Is there enough runoff to feed this, this pond? And sometimes ponds could start with good runoff, and then development around them, stuff gets diverted, water gets diverted off property or even on site, and it can affect the water being put into the pond. But this pond is spring fed, and that's pretty evident by the height of the water, the color of the water, and how clean it looks when you look across here. We've got a ton of wildlife in here. I see a turtle right over there. We had an otter or a beaver splashing. We've heard fish. We've got frogs. We've got hawks up above. So this little ecosystem is healthy, but not everything can be paradise. So we're going to look at some other things that are important for a landowner and a buyer evaluating a pond, and that's going to be the dam and access around the pond. So let's go take a look at that. Well, Cody, we've made our way around the pond just a few yards, and we've come to the spillway of this pond. And a spillway is super important. You've seen ponds that have a pipe in them for water drainage, but those pipes are just for everyday drainage, and if you get a heavy storm, they cannot handle the water flow that's coming through a pond. And if it can't handle it, then you have the opportunity for that water to crest the dam and cause issues. So a spillway is created from usually on one corner of the dam to allow water, when it gets to a certain height, to spill over without impacting the dam. And it's supposed to wrap around and drain off away from the dam. But as you can see right here, it's an excellent example of poor maintenance on this pond. The spillway is clogged. It's basically an extension of the pond. The spillway actually at one time spilled right through here, and probably over time due to debris, and we see debris in here now that has floated in. That stuff can build up, and as it breaks down, it turns into dirt and it catches mud. And then also you get some beavers and other critters that will go in here and mat it up because they want the pond to get as deep as they can. So this is a very important part of a pond and pond maintenance and management that some people just overlook. But as you can see, we are really close. If I get down here, you know, this is dam level right here. So we're not too far from this potentially cresting over if this water has no place to flow to. So this would be a number one concern. It will cost a few $1,000s to dredge this out, and the proper way to do it is dredge it where it flows, and then put some large stone in here that will allow that water to flow over it without eroding anything. And then periodically you got to come out here and remove these logs and debris and sticks and stuff off of that riprap rock so that it doesn't turn into this that we have here, which is causing some damage to this dam. But this is a good example of something bad to look for on a pond and around a pond dam. So spillway management is definitely of concern when you're looking at a pond. All right, Cody, we are now on the dam. We're literally 10 yards away from the spillway where we had issues, right? So what do we see here? If we come on down and look at this, you see where the water level of the pond is. It's almost at the point where it could crest over. And if I look here, I'm looking at all this debris right here. You see how it's all matted up, leaves are pushed up. This pond has spilled over its dam, and it's come all the way down to this point, and here's a big rodent hole done by a groundhog or a nutria. And if I look down there, we'll put the stick. I want you to see how deep this hole is. Look how deep that hole is. That's a good 3 feet. And you can hear the water running. And if you pan behind you and you look down, you can see the stream where this pond is not draining out of the spillway like it's supposed to. It's draining through itself. And this is a severe example of what rodents can do to your dam. It's also an indicator of things that trees can do. If you allow trees to grow, especially big ones, and if they were to die or they fall into the pond or fall off of the dam and then their root system makes a big root ball hole, it can do the same thing and create a void for water to flow into. And water will always find a way to get through those voids. And when those roots are popped off of the tree and they decay, they're going to decay and leave a void, and water's going to find its way. So a couple of issues here just in this one spot is we've got rodent damage that has caused a breach in the dam. We've got a bad spillway that is now allowing water to breach over the dam because of this low area that has come up as a result of the rodents. Because if you look down here, you can see where the rodents had dug this out and where it has caved in. And now we have a 3-foot hole that's basically an underground trench that is allowing water to go out. So this dam will fail. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of when, if it's not repaired. So when you get out on a property, the dam inspection is very important. Take your time, look for things like this. Sometimes there's not a hole and you would not hear this water flowing, but you might see it on the back side of the dam. And if it doesn't look natural, like that's where it's supposed to be, it's not natural. And we need to address it. We need to take a look at what we're dealing with, because just in these two little projects, we're talking thousands of dollars to correct it. And that may make or break a deal for either a seller selling the property or for you as a buyer making a purchase decision. So we want to take our time and evaluate the dam and the structure of the pond, in addition to what we talked about earlier with the ecosystem and the wildlife and the water source. So I've got a couple more things we're going to go look at, so come with me and I'm going to show you a couple other things that we need to be concerned about. Well, Cody, you just saw how beautiful that pond is, but even beauty can have the beast with it on a pond dam. And we saw a place just before getting over here, it's about 10 yards back that way, where rodents have caused a breach in the dam. And here everything looks normal. But when you get on the back side of this dam, if you look down here, we've got running water. And that's a big concern, because somewhere that water is coming out of this pond, going through this dam and coming out. And so it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when this dam is going to be breached. Now you can get on a pond that doesn't have rodent issues on it, but it could still have this going on. And I've been on some properties where the pond dam on the back side was covered with briars, you know, they're head high, or a lot of vegetation, and people don't take the time to go and walk that lower area, because if they just gone down here to the bottom like you see right here, they would have walked in all that muck and they would have found potentially found where breaches in the dam are occurring. So again, the pond dam is super important, the spillway is super important, and you need to take that time, do whatever you got to do to battle the chiggers and ticks, and get in there and make sure that if you own a dam or own a pond, that you take the time to check this periodically. And if you're looking at buying a piece of property that has a pond on it, you definitely want to inspect all aspects of the dam. Now, since we don't have signs of rodent here like we did at the other spot, this may be caused by root systems, by these big trees that you see around me. And there's a bunch of them if you pan down further down the dam. As these trees grow, their roots are going to the water. They want a water source, and that's why they get so big around dams. But what will happen is a beaver may come and cut that tree down and kill it, or they'll girdle it and kill it. There's an example of one right behind us we may look at. Or this tree might get blown over by the wind. It might fall into the pond and the root ball come out of the ground and snap those roots off. And when it does that, that root's going to die. And if that root goes from here to the water and it dies, over time it's going to rot. And when it rots, it creates a void. And that water will find its way through that void and then out the back of your pond dam. And so another takeaway as we look at this pond dam is there's entirely too much tree vegetation on this dam, and these trees need to be removed. When this dam gets repaired, that would be a #1 priority, is to remove these trees to make the repair complete and long lasting. So again, just to recap, not everything is rodent caused. It can be done by tree roots, but you've got to get back here on the back side of the dam and inspect those things to make sure that you don't have any leakage on the back side of the dam. Well, Cody, you know, when you're on this pond dam, it kind of seems magical, doesn't it? You've got this nice walkway with water beside of you and arches of shade, but in reality, this is not healthy for this pond and the pond dam. The pond is an asset. It costs a lot to build one. It costs less to maintain it if you have it. These trees are not healthy for a pond dam, and I would recommend that if you're looking at buying a place that has a pond, or you have a pond now, that you look at which trees you might want to remove, if not all of them, and keep them off. Some of the best pond dams in the world don't have a tree on them. They have it where they can mow it and maintain it, and with just keeping grass on it. If you want trees around your pond, have them on the edges, and that's where you do your fishing, and you can have a walking trail around and get the same effect here. But your pond dam is so important that you can't let this grow up, and don't let the beauty of it blind your foresight of what's to come if you leave this like it is. It's going to create the issues we saw, giving the rodents cover, giving beavers food, and then also creating potential gaps in the dam for water to drain off of. Vegetation management on a pond dam is super important, and I just want to point that out to you while we're here, because it is a beautiful setting, but at the same time it is not what you want on a pond dam. Cody, one other thing that we need to consider when we have a pond is liability and risk, not just to our families, but to neighbors and potentially trespassers onto our property. And this pond is really close to the property line. And as you pan over my left shoulder, you'll see a survey stake in the ground, but there's also a neighbor's backyard right here. So there are things that landowners need to be aware of when they have a body of water, whether it's on the property edge or in the center of their property. You have the potential for unwanted human beings to come and fish, swim, put canoes in the water, and potentially hurt themselves via drowning or something. So you need to evaluate your risk if you already own property that has a pond on it, but also your risk if you're buying property that has a pond. There's things you can do to mitigate those risks. You can fence, you can post, you can talk to neighbors and let them know that, hey, I'm the new owner and we don't allow folks in here, so if you see anybody coming onto the property, please give us a call so we can notify law enforcement if needed. Also, there's some additional property insurance concerns that you need to think about, and in the forms of liability coverage, maybe an umbrella policy to add on top of your standard liability in the event something bad was happened and somebody got into your pond and drowned. So it's just like having a swimming pool on your property. It's just a natural pool, and you need to care for it in that manner. You want to keep your neighbors out of it and critters out of it, but it's the same with a pond. You need to plan for that and understand that you as a landowner have some responsibility to safeguard other people from your pond. And a lot of people overlook that, but I want to point it out, especially to people that are thinking about buying a property with a pond. You need to be able to safeguard this from the public. Well, Cody, we've spent a little bit of time on this pond, and I've shown you some of the things that you need to be aware of if you're thinking about buying property with a pond. What are your questions? What do you think?
What I think is it was an incredible learning experience for me, because as somebody with very little experience in a habitat type like this, or a property asset like a pond, you know, I roll up to this and I see a big body of water. I see it may have some wildlife value. I see it may have some recreational value or opportunities. But once you visit with somebody like Sean, who looks at it more detailed with a trained eye, you realize there's a lot more to it than just a body of water. So Sean, my question to you would be, what does a managed pond look like?
Well, that's a good question, and I've got the place I want to take you and show you what a highly managed pond looks like. But it still has issues that we need to talk about, Cody.
All right.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.